Hi, I'm Keisha with One Oak, One of a Kind. I'm going to show you how to create your very own one of a kind indoor herb garden. First of all, drainage and soil are very important with planting your herbs. Herbs like to have a well-drained soil, and it's important to make sure your pot is porous and can get oxygen into the root system and the soil. I recommend putting rocks in the bottom of your tray. So I'm going to use a clay pot. Clay pots are great because they are very porous, but this is the tray for the bottom. This will collect the excess water that runs off. Instead of just having the tray down here by itself, I like to put some rocks in the bottom so that the pot can drain into the rocks. I don't typically put rocks into the pot itself, so I like to put rocks on the tray. One thing though, since the pots are porous, it's important to seal the tray. So I like to use just a polyacrylic or some kind of sealer that will seal it to prevent water from leaking through the pot onto your surface or your windowsill. So the first thing you'll do is spray this. I've already sprayed this with a glaze, and then we will add some rocks. You don't need a lot of rocks, just enough for the pot to sit up off of the tray so it can drain properly. Obviously you want to make sure that your pots have holes in the bottom. This one has a big hole there, so we'll just kind of set it on the rocks there, and then we'll start with our herbs. So this is a fairly big pot. I can plant quite a few herbs in here. I do like to have my herbs kind of packed together. I like to make my pots look full and pretty, so I always keep that in mind when I'm picking out my herbs. You'll have your best chance of growing herbs if you start with a 3.5 or 4-inch potted herb. So that's about the size of these. We've got 3.5 and 4-inch pots here. This is going to set you up for success with your very own indoor herb garden. So rather than growing them by seeds, these are well established, they're ready to go, and you can find herbs like this even at your local grocery store. Sometimes grocery stores will have herbs potted up in the sizes like this. They may be wrapped in plastic, but they will do just fine for you regardless. So we're just filling the pot with soil. I don't like to pack the soil in there again because we want to make sure that we're getting oxygen to the roots once we plant them in there. But this pot will probably fit 3 or 4 4-inch herbs. So we'll get it kind of packed in there and pick out the herbs. So keep in mind there's different varieties of herbs. There are herbs that will spread out more. There's herbs that are perennials that'll come back year after year, and some won't. So when you're looking at herbs, just keep that in mind. You can always reference the tag on each herb. If you have questions on your herbs or you're unsure of the best growing conditions for them, you can reference them in books, the tags, or even use the internet to help you search as well. So the soil mixture I used is just a regular potting soil. It is a mixture that's good for potted herbs. It can be an indoor or outdoor mix because you could potentially have your herbs indoors, maybe in the winter time, and outdoors in the summertime. So the herbs I've chose for this pot, I'm going to create a little pizza garden. So I'm choosing herbs that could be used on pizza. They can be used for other things as well, but this is just the fun one that I'm going to create. So I've got a couple different kinds of basil. Basil can be purple in color or green, and I like the purple color, so I want to add that in there just for some color choice difference. I also have chives and oregano, also good pizza toppings, and add lots of flavor to any dish you're cooking, especially Italian. The oregano and chives, they have some different textures, so we will use those as well. It's nice to mix in different textures, but we will start here with the oregano. This one doesn't get super tall, but you kind of want to keep in mind too when you're planting them the direction of your pot. So is your pot going to be kind of one-sided? Is it going to be seen on all sides, all directions? Just decide on how you want to arrange your herbs. I'm going to kind of put my basil towards the back. It is a taller plant, it can get taller, so I'm going to put that one towards the back. And you'll notice even with some of your herbs, sometimes these 4-inch pots, they may have 2 separate plants in them. So this basil, it actually has 2 plants growing in it, so you could potentially divide them up or spread them out. When you're potting your herbs in the pot, also keep in mind the care for them, whether they like a lot of water or not as much water, if they like a lot of sunlight or it doesn't matter. These are all important things to note too when you're planting. So I'm keeping kind of about an inch lip on the pot here. That way when I go to water it, water won't seep over the edges. And once the soil gets packed in there, you know, after a few weeks of watering, you may even have to add a little bit more soil just to get it back up to that level once it settles in, you know, once the roots get established. So these chives will spread and grow bigger as well. So this will be a very full garden here in a few weeks. When it comes to watering, it's best to check the soil with your finger so that you can really understand if it's wet enough to feel. And as I stick my finger in here a couple inches down, I feel that it's pretty wet. That's a good way to check. Some people also will check for water by lifting the pot, so you can get a sense of how heavy the pot is when it needs water and how heavy it is after it's been watered, so that way you know when to water your plants. You can also use a wooden stick, so you could use even a kebab stick or a toothpick, even if you have smaller pots. But you can stick this in the pot, and you can stick it way down in there, kind of like you're testing a cake. If it comes out and there's soil that's sticking to it, you know that it's wet enough, it doesn't need water, it's got an adequate water level, and so forth. So if it comes out dry, it might need some water. You don't want your herbs to sit in excess moisture, so it's important to have the drainage. That's why we have the rocks down below. You can check it with your finger, you can check it with the wooden stick, as I mentioned. You can also use a moisture meter. A moisture meter can be inserted into the pot a few inches down, and it will check the moisture of the water, or of the pot, to let you know if it's dry, normal, or may need a little bit more. And it's going to show different depending on the types of plants you grow. So if you're growing succulents or something that doesn't require a lot of water, then you would want it to have the lower moisture level. If you're growing your herbs, they do like to be pretty wet, so you'll want to make sure that they're higher on the moisture level. So that's a very helpful tool. This can also check the pH, the light, and the fertility. So there's different settings on here. These are fairly inexpensive, and they're a handy gadget for new gardeners as well. So fairly inexpensive. You can get these at a lot of your garden stores. You can even get these at a farm store or your local hardware store. Watering will also depend a lot on the climate you're in. So I live here in Iowa, and we have winters that can get pretty dry and dark. So if I'm growing indoor herbs during the winter months, they aren't going to need as much water. Some herbs can even go dormant during the winter, so they really won't require as much water at all. Once the spring comes around, you're going to need more water. So it just kind of depends on the climate you're in. It's pretty common for your leaves on your herbs to turn yellow if they're overwatered. Basil especially can start to wilt if it's underwatered. So just keep an eye on your plants. You'll get to know your plants the more you're around them, the more you're working with them. But you will notice they can talk to you and tell you when they need water or if they've had too much water. Ideally, the best temperature for your plants is 60 to 65 degrees. However, they'll do just fine in your home if you're around 70 or 72 degrees. They do like to be a little bit cooler at night. Let's talk about lighting. Herbs like a lot of light. It's best to keep them in a southeast or southwest facing window. Again, this will also depend on your climate and location and the zone that you're in, but for the most part, they like lots of sun in a south facing window. If you do keep your herbs in a windowsill, it's important to rotate the pot. That way the plants don't start to stretch towards the sun one way or another. It'll keep them growing full and fresh. So if you do keep them in a window, make sure to turn the pot occasionally. Most herbs like 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. If you notice the plants start to get tall and leggy, they may need some more sunlight. I call this stretching. You'll really see this on basil or parsley. Basil is one that will get tall and stretchy with little leaves and look very leggy. If you do notice your plants start to get stretchy, it's important to make sure they get more sunlight. So you might have to move them around, or you may have to invest in a grow light. Grow lights can be purchased at your local gardening store, or you can find them online as well. Some grow lights even have trays in the bottom for self-watering. This will ensure that your plants get adequate water as well as light. Some grow lights can even be stored on your countertop right in your kitchen. They'll fit right under your cabinets. This will make your herbs easily accessible for cooking. Now that we've finished our pizza garden, we can move on to some individual plants. The nice thing about this pizza garden, these are 4-inch pots, so they're already pretty well established, so you can start harvesting these already. Let's move on to mint. There are many different varieties of mint, and you could even create your own cocktail herb garden using mint and some other things like lavender that can be used in drinks or cocktails. So there's different types of mint. There's peppermint, spearmint, all different kinds. This is a peppermint herb. This is a smaller one. Again, it's just a baby in a 4-inch pot, but it's already well established. So you're gonna have a better chance of keeping these herbs alive as they're bigger, not just starting them by seed. It's important when you're planting your herbs to kind of loosen up the soil. Since they've been in their pots for a while, probably at the nursery or garden center, you'll just want to kind of loosen up those roots to give them a good head start growing in a pot. Typically the pot, you'll want to go up a size on your pot. This one is just the same size, but I'm just going to kind of show you. This could be divided up, so mint can be divided up if you wanted to divide it up and make it smaller, which I might do that with this one. Yeah, you can kind of see there's many plants inside those 4-inch pots, so. So we'll pot it in here, give it some fresh soil. Again, you could add a little fertilizer too. Obviously you'll want to read the instructions with the fertilizer. When you're doing them individual pots, they won't need much. Also, when you read about each plant, if it does require rich soil, that would mean it could use fertilizer, or it could use compost to make the soil rich. Otherwise, if it says it doesn't need such a rich soil, you know, then you probably could get by without fertilizer or not doing as much fertilizer or compost in there. So we've got our peppermint here. With mint, it can spread and get very big very fast. So when you're going to harvest your mint, or if you notice it getting really full or really big really fast, just harvest it. You can always dry the leaves, you can freeze them, but just keep an eye on it. So, and you can smell this one. This one's very fragrant. Again, with the drainage, because I don't put any rocks or anything in the bottom, and you want to make sure your tray is glazed as well or sealed in there, but I again like to add some rocks down there just to get that pot up off that tray to let the water flow through if you do tend to overwater. Some herbs that are easy to grow indoors include parsley, cilantro, basil, chives, peppermint, and even rosemary. These plants will set you up for success if you want to try them out or if you're a new herb gardener. Some of the more difficult plants to grow indoors in your kitchen garden might be lavender or thyme or sage. Some of these, they just require a special soil type that might be more sandy or more porous rather than your generic potting soil that you could buy. So these might be a little tricky. So if you are a beginner, I would maybe wait a year or two on these till you can get the hang of planting your herbs and caring for them indoors. If you're going to try other edible plants indoors, like maybe strawberries or raspberries or blueberries, definitely make sure that you get a dwarf size plant if you're planting them indoors. Make sure that they'll fit your pot. Strawberries can grow like crazy, raspberry bushes can get really big, but you can buy dwarf plants that are suitable for indoor gardening as well. Let's talk about harvesting. Cilantro, for example, will gradually get thinner and thinner the more you harvest it. So with cilantro, I like to make sure that I have a pack of seeds on hand. So that way I can reseed the cilantro directly into it. So you can sow the seeds directly into the soil as you harvest. It's good to do this every 2 to 3 weeks to ensure that you're going to continually get your herb to produce throughout the season. So chives, they're going to get a lot taller and thicker. This is just a baby chive plant, but obviously they're going to continue to grow. With chives, and any herb for that matter, you want to make sure that you're only harvesting no more than 1/3 of the plant. This will make sure that it continues to grow strong and produce for you. So just make sure not to clip too much of your plant and keep 2/3 of the plant intact for the next cycle. If you're a beginner, don't worry, herbs are really easy to grow and a great way to start. Now that you've learned a little bit about different types of herbs that you can grow yourself in your very own herb garden, you have the confidence to go out and create your own one-of-a-kind indoor herb garden.